And when we talk about Islamophobia, there is Islamophobia, of course there is. There is Islamophobia because our police force actually were too scared to tackle grooming and rape of our youth because of fear of being called a racist. That's Islamophobia, not the Islamophobia. Phobia is an irrational fear, okay? It's quite rational to fear female genital mutation of 2,000 British Muslim girls every year, terrorism like happened to Lee Rigby. Like 2 days ago, 6 Muslims who were sentenced to 19, 20 years each because they were planning to blow up the English Defence League due to the blasphemy law within the Quran. Okay, there's a link to all these things. The same with the Muslim grooming gangs. As a common denominator, you have to look for what the issue is, what links them all. They're all Muslim.
I get confused when you say Islam, and then you say Islamist, and then you say Muslim, because they're different things.
They are. I'm from Luton Town.
I'm going to talk to...
Yeah, I'm from Luton Town. I know so many Muslims, yeah, and I'm sitting here. If you take these people's careers away and their money away, they won't be sitting there. I'm a volunteer, okay? There's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer. What has happened to me through having this opinion and speaking out the way I do, it's destroyed my life, it's destroyed my wife's life, it's destroyed my mother's life. I live with constant death threats. I've got some of them here if you want to read when we talk about a two-tier policing system. I have to wear a bulletproof vest. I've got people wanting to murder me and massacre me.
Well, then stop being a racist and a bigot.
Racist? Can you please explain one thing I've ever said?
I am a British citizen. I was born in this country, and I do not spout off rubbish like you do. Okay?
No, what am I saying that's rubbish?
I haven't got death threats. Do you know why? It's because I'm a nice person.
Please explain.
If
you talk against Islam, you'll have death threats. Please explain what I've said that's racist. Please explain.
What you've done is...
No, please explain what I've said that's racist.
No, I'll tell you what's racist.
No, she's called me a racist.
Okay, well...
Please explain.
Please explain. Granny will pick it up.
So you're not going to explain.
What you've done is you've taken a community with, hundreds of thousands of members...
Billions of people.
And you've picked like a tiny minority, and you've said they're all like that. I think that's the slightly racist part.
You're
What's racist? What racist is Islam?
Against all Muslims.
No, I'm not against all Muslims.
Yes,
I got married last year. I had 4 Muslims at my wedding. I had 4 Muslims at my wedding.
I'm not racist. Admit your true colours.
Excuse me. You think that just because you want to call us racist or extremists or far right, what have I said that's racist?
I heard you on Radio 4 the other day saying that you are a peaceful movement, okay, and you are not against violence.
You still haven't explained what I said that was racist.
Have you actually looked at your own personal
You still
record?
haven't explained what I said about racism.
You've actually been convicted of thuggery,
what I've said
and you're a football
racist.
Hooligan.
So
how can you come on to Radio 4 and say
please explain what I said. Please explain what I've said that's racist.
You stood in the Newcastle...
I've just said it. You've just cited loads of things relating to Islam and talking about Islamists.
So there's not a problem in this country.
There's not a problem in this country. Muslim people killed by white people.
There's not a problem in this country.
You can spark
There's not a problem in this country of Islam.
Why are you focusing on certain incidents?
No, what you're doing is rather than listening to the point, you just want to shout racist, which is what's happening in this country for 15, 20 years.
Because you are.
No, what have I said? What have I said that's racist?
Because you are.
Tommy,
you're so weak.
You are racist.
You've got nothing to back up, darling.
Do you?
Tommy, let Carla speak.
You're getting
what
really
have I said that's
up.
racist?
You are a racist.
What have I said that's racist?
You're a racist.
What have I said?
Carla?
And you do not represent the views of the people in this country at all.
Sarah.
Nothing.
Carla?
You've got no substance to your argument. You're not even backing up. I have, yeah.
You've got loads of substance.
I have. What happened to Lee Rigby? What happened on 7/7? All the Muslim grooming gangs. Everything I say is factual.
Let someone else speak.
Right, is linking a mosque and terrorism in the same sentence Islamophobic? Sun News contributor Gavin McInnes joins us now from New York. Gavin, this is surprising to me that this has become the big debate on this, but it shouldn't. I guess it shouldn't. You look at politicians around the world, they are afraid to link the two things that go hand in hand in pretty much every terror incident we've been talking about for the last 15 years.
Yeah, it should be beholden upon the offended to prove that these jihadists haven't been radicalized in a mosque. The fact is they have. In fact, it's a hate fact. And if you spew hate facts, you should suffer no punishment whatsoever because he's telling the truth. Take the 10 past attacks on Western soil. Look at who did them. They were all radicalized in the West, and they were all radicalized in mosques.
Thomas Mulcair, the New Democrat Party leader, he is calling this Islamophobic. That's the actual word he used, speaking to reporters outside the House of Commons. Let's roll tape on that.
was irresponsible of the Prime Minister to throw the mosques into his comments. It was a form of Islamophobia, and it was wrong. So he should realize that he was wrong to do that and simply apologize to the Muslim community who want to be partners on these issues.
All right, so Gavin, you've got that. You've got the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the Canadian Muslim Lawyers Association saying there's got to be an apology. Meanwhile, the National Council of Canadian Muslims put out a book telling people if you see something wrong in your mosque, and the book's called United Against Terror, if you see something wrong, report it to the leadership. So they've linked mosques and terrorists, but they want an apology.
So they're allowed to notice it, but we're not. Have you noticed the only time you hear about moderate Muslims, the only time you hear them vocalize an opinion is when they're offended? Let's hear them vocalize an opinion about Charlie Hebdo or the 2 attacks that went on in Canada in the same week. I didn't hear anything going on then. Let's hear them get mad then.
In fairness, they did say that they condemned the attacks, but spent, like Justin Trudeau, about half of their statement saying, but this has nothing to do with us. This has nothing to do with us at all. Look, we've even got President Obama at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington this morning saying, look, you can link this with faith, but it's an aberration of faith, and let's remember the Crusades. So even Obama's going back to that as he's speaking at a Christian prayer breakfast. We can recognize everything except the facts in front of us.
That literally made my jaw drop this morning when he said that. He has to go back 1,000 years to justify their behavior. And then he loops in slavery. Yeah, Obama's slavery was bad. Christianity ended it. Anyway, the important thing here is that we're at a war. We're in a war, and it's religiously based, okay? So yes, there's Islamophobia, just like there was Nazi phobia in 1942. We don't want to make laws that make speech illegal, and we should always be wary of the government trying to outlaw sedition. However, in the time of war, you're going to break some eggs, and we have to investigate this jihadist. Right now, the situation we're in now, we're radicalizing our own people. So let's swing the pendulum the other way.
Look, the term Islamophobia has one purpose: to suppress any criticism, legitimate or not, of Islam. Do you buy that?
No. Mr. Prager sets up a false premise and then tries to defend it. First of all, that the use of the term is an attempt to suppress criticism. No one's saying you can't criticize any faith, discuss things openly, be critical of certain beliefs. But what we're talking about is hatred of Islam and Muslims. And we don't, again, the second part of his false premise is that we call it racist. Islam is an ideology. It's not a race. You can be a bigot. Maybe we should discuss whether Mr. Prager believes in anti-Muslim bigotry. But I mean, we get on a daily basis things like kill Mecca monkeys, Islamo-Nazi ragheads. A message on a website supporting Mr. Prager's column said Muslims are Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda are Muslim. Let's be done with it and kill them all. Is he now ready to repudiate Robert Spencer and Jihad Watch, one of his top supporters?
Dennis Prager, a quick answer to that, and I got to get Christopher into this conversation.
Jihad Watch is one of the most honorable websites that I know of monitoring jihad in the world today. No, nobody says kill all Muslims.
Do you defend that kind of language,
Who says kill
Dennis?
all Muslims? What do you think? It's despicable. Of course not. I mean, it's absurd.
Christopher, fear isn't exactly the same thing as hate. Christopher, isn't it possible to fear Islam or some aspects of it and be free of hate and not be a bigot?
Well, phobia, I think, as well as meaning fear, does imply dislike, and I dislike Islam as I dislike all religion. I'm just astounded there by the turn the discussion has taken. Every day, all the time, we have to hear propaganda pumped out of radio stations across the Muslim world, telling children to kill Jews, telling children to kill Hindus, telling children to kill Christians, telling them that their sisters and mothers and aunts are inferior, telling them that homosexuals should be stoned. We have to read and claim not to be offended about the stoning of 10 people in the Islamic Republic of Iran in the last week alone for crimes that they did not commit. There would not be crimes except under the mad religious laws that Islam proposes. Mr. Hooper has to get used to this idea. Some of us find that offensive too, but we don't demand that he be shut down or be prosecuted. We put up with his self-pity. We put up with his rantings and his distortions because we believe in the First Amendment. All we ask in return is that he upholds. All we demand in return is he upholds the First Amendment too.
We love the First Amendment. We uphold it every day. And the First Amendment also protects free expression of religion. And when you engage in acts of intimidation against a religious group, that goes against the First Amendment.
Dennis Prager, you get the last word tonight.
You haven't read, you have neither read nor understood the First Amendment, sir.
Mr. Hooper said that he welcomes criticism of Islam. Can one say that women, as a rule, are treated better in the Western world than the Islamic world? Is one who says that, is that person an Islamophobe?
No,
yes or no?
we discuss that issue every day.
So one can say that. So one can say that and not be accused.
Again, you set up a false premise. We discuss that kind of issue all the time.
I asked that.
And by the way,
really?
the website that Mr. Prager is defending, the website that Mr. Prager is defending says that we should make the life of Muslims in the West so difficult they will leave.
Give me your argument against that is your critique of Islam.
Islam means submission to the will of Allah. A doctrine that requires from the individual to become a slave, in my view, is bad. Islam limits the imagination to what you can find in the Quran and to following the example of the Prophet Muhammad. I think that's bad, and that's what keeps people in the Islamic world backward. Islam treats women, at least subordinates women to men, is obsessed with obedience, calls for the matter of gays for adulterers, and is therefore very violent and inhuman. All this is in the Quran, all this is in the Hadith, and anywhere that Islamic Sharia or Islamic rule is implemented, you see that these things are carried out.
Surely there are many versions of Islam, like there are many versions of Christianity, of Judaism, of all major religions. You're presenting it as one thing, and it's just obviously not.
Islam, as a faith, as a doctrine, defined by what's in the Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, and unreformed, unchallenged, is a monolith.
I could point to other things in other holy books that are equally offensive.
The other holy books, the Old Testament, the Bible, have become almost obsolete. There are no Christians who want to have the Bible replace any constitution in Western society. The Pope has actually apologized.
Whoa. You live in the United States of America. This is a country where evangelical Christianity has ascended to the highest ranks of power, where conservative social values drawn and justified by the Bible are imposed on people every single day.
I think you're exaggerating.
They should abortion doctors in the United States of America. Homophobia is rampant.
When abortion doctors in the United States were shot, the federal government reacted to it by going after the perpetrators, putting them on trial and jailing them. When in Iran, two men went after a woman and a man holding hands and shot them, they were acquitted by the Supreme Court. That is the core difference. Never confuse Islamic Sharia and the Muslims who really mean it with those extremist Christians who live in the United States. Extremist Christians in the United States or any other Western society face the rule of law and are dealt with accordingly.
The part that's attracted so much attention calls on the government to, quote, condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and have the Heritage Committee develop an approach to stopping it.
We need to recognize that we have a problem and we need to tackle it head on.
She and her supporters point to the Quebec City mosque attack as horrifying new evidence of the problem.
Are you with me?
But some opponents of the motion, like those gathered in Toronto tonight, express fear, even fury, over the idea that this will lead to criminalizing anyone who wants to criticize Islam, though the motion proposes no such thing. Most Conservative leadership contenders are lining up to say they won't support the resolution.
What I'm hearing from my constituents and across the country is they're worried about it, that they are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to say certain things about, for example, criticizing Sharia law.
I also am very concerned that these types of motions could lead to bills that limit free speech.
Liberal supporters of the non-binding motion say that's just not true.
Free speech is still free speech. Hate speech is still hate speech. And we still have those laws in Canada.
Look, this motion is...
If the Liberals thought they might paint the Conservatives into an ugly corner, the Conservatives pushed back with a different motion denouncing prejudice against all religions. But Khalid says she won't remove the word Islamophobia from hers.
I will not do so any more than I would speak to the Holocaust and not mention that the overwhelming majority of victims were 6 million followers of the Jewish faith.
And it does seem that there is at least one limit to the Liberals' concern, namely the border. The Heritage Minister was asked today why her party didn't denounce Donald Trump's ban on travelers from several Muslim-majority countries. She said this motion is about what happens in this country. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.